You can be doing work you love, living a life you choose, and still wake up depleted and quietly unsure of who you are anymore. Today, a conversation about why that happens and what your emotions have been trying to tell you all along. Welcome to the Midlife Reinvention podcast, a podcast helping women in career and life transitions achieve clarity on their next steps so they can transform uncertainty into an energizing next chapter. I'm your host, Kavita Ahuja, and the founder of It's My Time Now Coaching. If you're wondering what's next in your career or life, you are in the right place. Through solo and guest episodes, you'll gain practical tips, tools, and inspiration to help you uncover blocks, gain confidence, and be, do, and have what you want. I rediscovered myself after the age of 50, and I know you can too. It's my time now to help you do just that. I'm so excited you're here. Let's dive in. Hello and welcome back to the Midlife Reinvention podcast. It's your coach, Kavita. If you're new here, welcome to the Midlife Reinvention podcast family. Something brought you to this episode, and I'm so glad you came. And if you're a returning listener, thank you so much. I don't take it lightly that you're here, choosing to spend your time with me today. Last week, on my birthday episode, I told you that even at 60, my own reason for being is still evolving, that our purpose is never something we find once and keep forever. And today, you're going to hear that same truth from someone who has spent her whole career studying how we listen to ourselves. In this conversation, my guest, Dr. Lorea Martinez, and I explore three things, and I think you'll feel them really in your bones. First, why your emotions are not a problem to manage, but information to read, and how the feelings that matter most are the ones sitting quietly beneath the surface. Second, why you can feel lost or burnt out, even while you're living your purpose, and why that is not a failure, but a signal that your purpose is asking you to evolve. And third, why the thing that comes next for you does not have to be some grand, finished, perfect plan, and how it can begin instead with one small, curious step. So stay with me to the end, because what comes up in this conversation about listening to yourself might be exactly the permission you have been waiting for. Hello and welcome back to the Midlife Reinvention podcast. It's your coach, Kavita, and today I'm really excited to have on the show a wonderful guest whose insights and experience I'm sure will enlighten you. Today we have Dr. Lorea Martinez, who is the founder of Heart in Mind and one of the leading voices on emotional intelligence. She spent decades in education, wrote an award-winning book for teachers, and then burnout stopped her in her tracks. That experience became her new book, Living with the Heart in Mind. And here's what I love about her approach. She doesn't treat our emotions as weaknesses to push past. She treats them as data, as signals worth listening to. So I'm so pleased to have you here, Dr. Martinez. Can I call you Lorea?
Absolutely. Thank you for having me, Kavita. It's a pleasure.
Yes, welcome to the podcast. And I'm really, really glad you're here. I know that we had an initial meeting and I really enjoyed your story, and I thought it would be really helpful for the listeners and to hear from you. So maybe we can just get right into it. You have spent, as I said in your introduction, you spent 20 years in education. You were a teacher, an administrator, and a board member as well. And when we talked earlier, you had described a moment when you were walking down the street with a colleague and you suddenly started crying and you couldn't stop. So maybe you could tell us what happened at that moment and what had caused this to happen, what had led to that moment, and just go from there.
Well, so I was walking with a colleague. It was a beautiful morning, and we were discussing, it was just a brainstorming conversation about, he was helping me think through how to grow my consulting business. And he mentioned like a new line of work that I could consider. And I noticed feelings of overwhelm, just like really rising, almost kind of like from my stomach up. Felt very overwhelmed and anxious about even considering something added to my plate. And I started crying, which is something that I don't have an issue with crying, right? I think that it's a great way to release so many feelings, but it just took over, and I had to keep walking and just kind of like let the cycle go through. And that day I had to really name for myself that something big wasn't working. And you mentioned what led you to that point. And I think that's such a good question, because we never get to those situations in life suddenly. Something normally tends to be building underneath the surface that we are not paying attention. And for me, I knew that there was an annoying voice there saying, oh, this is not working. This might not be the direction you want to go next. But the way that I was dealing with that was to continue pushing forward and continue with the work and continue with all the responsibilities in my life. And that day I said, this is not going in the right direction. I need to really take some time to think about why that is, how I got here, and really unpack those feelings.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's interesting. You mentioned a couple of things. You mentioned that voice that was inside of you. And I remember hearing that voice as well when I made a transition out of my career. And it's so important sometimes we just ignore it, right? But it does build. And then it sounded like that was kind of your breaking point where it's like, okay, I can't take this anymore. And over the years, I've learned that that's more common than not, right? So that's kind of, I guess, leads to maybe the next question is that you had said that burnout, like I guess that's what you were experiencing with that overwhelm and anxiousness that you described when you had that moment. But you also say that burnout is often misunderstood as a woman says, I'm just working too much, or I just need to try harder, or those things that women say, and generally women tend to say, right? So you talked about this building underneath it. So what are some of the signals that you have seen yourself or that you've seen in others that women tend to kind of explain things away?
One of the things that was missing for me, it was a sense of joy. And I can tell you that I was doing the work that I love. I was living my purpose. I have been, as you mentioned, in education for 20 years, and that had been always the way that I was wholeheartedly contributing to the betterment of society. That was my contribution in the world. And still, you can burn out even if you are living your purpose. And that was something that I think I knew theoretically that could happen, but until I went through it, I realized, well, it has a deeper meaning. And for me, the irony of my story is that that's something I had been teaching to others, how you have to relive and revisit your purpose during your lifetime. It's not a destination. Sometimes we think about purpose as you find it and you are good for the rest of your life. And that's actually not the case. Purpose is something that we have to revisit, because as women, we change. Yeah. Our life experiences change us. Parenting changes who you are, your work, your relationships. So as you are aging, your sense of purpose will change with you. But if you are not paying attention, like this was my wake-up call, then you might miss that signal that, hey, maybe I need to reframe my purpose. And for me, that showed up in the form of not feeling joy, things that were fulfilling before, maybe parts of my work that I had done with a second thought started to feel like a burden, started to feel like, oh, I'm just going through the routines and habits but I'm not getting the same reward, the same emotional reward of feeling impactful, feeling positive, feeling that I have the energy and the motivation to keep going.
Was it also that, just going back to that, because there's so many thoughts going through my head as you said that, but was it also that you kind of felt like everything should be fine? Because I mean, I have this great job and I'm in this great career. That's kind of, why should I be feeling like this? And it's almost like from the outside, everything seemed perfect, but from the inside, it was far from perfect.
Absolutely. And that's the piece around listening to your own emotions, and emotions are wise. They are information, they provide data. And again, my work with educators was teaching social emotional skills, emotional intelligence. So this is something that I know, that I teach, that I have the tools for. But in that particular case, I was not applying the tools to myself. And I was seeing what was happening, but it was, again, more like noise in the background. And sometimes it does take that moment of realization to really take the pause. And I think it's very courageous to take that pause. And I know for some of your listeners, that's the part where the reinvention starts, because unless you take that moment to just look at everything holistically and realize, okay, things are not what they used to be, or I'm not feeling the same way, and not judge it, which is our natural tendency, but approach it with curiosity. And that's, for me, once I was able to say, oh, we need this pause, right? And I need to ask questions, open-ended. What am I feeling? Why am I feeling this way? What's missing, right? And really sit with that situation for a little bit to really try to understand. I felt like that was the moment of starting to heal, because I was taking the time to listen to myself and the needs that I had at the moment, which were different to the needs I had 3 or 4 years ago.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so in line with what I teach and what I actually went through myself, because just going back to what you said about that revisiting your purpose, and that's not static, and because we change, and that doesn't mean that what our purpose was 20 years ago that made us joyful or fulfilled doesn't have to be the same as it is now. And I refer to the concept of ikigai, which is your reason for being, and that changes over time. And that happened to me as well. Whereas you may feel like, oh, it should feel good. It should because everything seems perfect. I'm at the top of my game. But why am I not feeling this way? And I love how you said that it could be a trigger that you had. It's like overwhelm that just happens. But then there's that phase where you really take the pause, and
Yes,
it's so important and courageous, as you said, to take that pause, where you ask those questions. So it's very much in alignment. And I love that when you said cultivating purpose over finding it. And it's not a destination as well. And often people think that, oh, especially in their 50s and 60s, it's like it's a crisis. It's not. It's actually an opportunity to kind of revisit our purpose.
yes. And I would say it is a crisis of purpose. It's a crisis of identity, but it's not a failure. I think that the difference is in seeing your experience as you are not good enough, or because during that period where I was struggling, I had a lot of negative self-talk as well. And because I was not feeling that joy, there was a lot of like, oh, you are lazy, you are not doing enough, you have to keep pushing forward, you have to keep trying harder. And that's the way that you start doing things that compromise your well-being, because you are not paying attention truly to what you are experiencing. But normally when you have these situations, and I remember when I started writing the book and I started talking with people about what I was writing about, there were so many individuals who opened up and said, wow, I think I'm burnout too. This is what I'm experiencing. And there's almost like a little bit of fear to say, I feel burnout, because we assume that, oh, that means that I'm weak, that I'm not able to handle life's challenges, or I'm not able to handle high stressful job. And it has nothing to do with that. There are so many components and they are different for different individuals, how we get to that point, but truly seeing it as a crisis, and that in the sense of this is a moment to pay attention. Like there's something within you that is telling you to pay attention to what's happening.
Yeah.
And if you see it that way, then it's less about seeing it from a perspective of I'm lacking things versus I need to nurture myself in a different way. And I think that part of applying yourself self-compassion and looking at your own suffering as a woman with care and kindness, the same kindness that we provide to others, it really changes the equation.
Yes.
In terms of how we see these transitions that we go through life. I think that it's unavoidable. What's avoidable is how much pain we kind of like re-engage in because we are not treating ourselves with kindness.
Yes. Yeah, those are such great points. And let's go back to that, your model, if we could. So you have at the center of what's called your heart and mind model, you have the idea that emotions are theta, like I mentioned earlier, and you talked about. That's those conversations you had with yourself, like you said, your inner critics saying, oh my God, you're not good enough, and judgment and all of that. So just for a woman who might be listening, who's been kind of pushing through, like probably you were or I was, and kind of going on autopilot and just going through the motions, what would you say? Where does she even begin to move past her or does she move past her feelings, or how does she name them? What does she do? What according to your model, what's the best way to begin?
Yeah, so there's one of the tools that I think is super helpful is think about your emotions as an iceberg. And there are the loud emotions, those live above the water. And normally those are, interestingly enough, the ones that society has conditioned us to be acceptable for us as women. And anger is not one of them. I can tell you that. Normally, there are other emotions that are much more in line with what you would consider quote unquote appropriate for women. So I think having that honesty of looking at those emotions, and the exercise is simply as draw an iceberg and a line for the water, and then just write down, name those emotions, the ones that live above the water, and then go deeper and ask yourself, what else am I feeling? And that's probably one of the most powerful questions, because there are many emotions that sit below that water that really are at the core of the issue you are dealing with. And those are harder emotions to name, because it could be disappointment on yourself or others. It could be feelings of loneliness, of abandonment, of feelings of hurt. So many things can happen. And the first step is to really, with honesty, and again, not judgment, but curiosity, having an open mind, to really being able to take that time to look and name those emotions. That can be very liberating, because then you start to detangle in a way. Sometimes you imagine emotions like a yarn ball, right? Like maybe your cat was playing with it and it's like a huge mess. And then when you do that type of exercise, when you're really naming your emotions, you're trying to take one end of that string of yarn and try to pull it slowly and try to see, oh, let me see what's here. Mm-hmm. And that can be something very helpful when you are trying to go through something difficult, so you can have more clarity about, oh, what is it that I'm experiencing? And from there, then you can see, okay, what are these feelings trying to tell me? What's the message of these feelings? And that's almost like the second part of honoring emotions, which is one of the skills it's the first skill in the heart and mind model.
Okay, sorry, I'm taking notes and absorbing. So I love that visual, because the iceberg. So basically under the water, you've got all these emotions that are building that push the ice out of the water, right? And if you didn't have those, then the obvious ones wouldn't surface. Is that right?
Well, you would only see the obvious ones,
Okay.
right? The ones that you are allowing yourself to admit that you have, maybe the ones that your context, your relationships around it might recognize and reinforce, if you will, because that's acceptable. So when you take that exercise, you are really looking deeper at what sits under my experience, and that can unlock some answers and some insights, because those emotions can be, because they are under the water, almost like conditioning your behavior, your thoughts, how you are engaging with what happens in your life. And if you don't pay attention to that, they are there and they don't go away, right? Unless you take the time to process them. And sometimes processing might be done individually, like if you do journaling or you do meditation. But sometimes they can be processed in social settings, right? With a good friend or with a professional. Like there are so many ways to process those feelings. But unless we do, I think that that's such a big part of also increasing our self-awareness as we are, as you were saying, aging and learning who we are as we become older.
Yeah. Interesting. So really it's naming those emotions, detangling them, and then asking, what am I experiencing and what are these emotions trying to tell me?
Exactly.
Yeah. And then once that's done, then I guess that's the moment where you can try to address them or right? And then to do something about that, right? And I guess that's the action piece is, okay, so what do we do with this information now, right? So
that's right. And that's the next skill is so HEART is an acronym. So the E is like your responses. And that's considering what are my options. That's the key question for that skill. And the options are related to your behaviors, to your thoughts, or also your emotions. So if you are feeling stuck, for example, and you want to feel joyful, or you want to feel content, or you want to feel more motivated, right? Is thinking, what are my options? How do I get myself from this feeling of, I don't know how to move forward, to those feelings? And then thinking about, this is more like a behavior-based skill. Like, what do I do in order to get myself there?
Yeah. So you had mentioned earlier, kind of treating it as bringing it with curiosity rather than panic, right? So then when you bring that curiosity, then that opens up to like, okay, what can I do next? And that's a question most of my listeners are going through right now is, okay, what do I do next with my life? Because something is not working right now. And how do I analyze this? How do I figure this out? And so emotions and understanding your emotions are the key. So,
and I want to bring something up that I think it's important also as listeners are considering this question of what do I do next? I know that perfection and perfectionist tendencies is a big thing for many women. And sometimes we have this idea that what's next is this big thing that it's already completed, it's beautiful, it's meaningful, it's all the things, but it doesn't need to be that way.
Yeah, I agree.
It can be a pilot, right? It can be just take one small risk, something that it's exciting. You don't know the outcome. You just know that you are putting yourself in a situation to learn something new. And I think that lowers the level, the expectation and the pressure to be performing all the time. And I believe, and that's something that I talk about in the book, there's a chapter on curiosity, how doing these small experiments of trying new things with not so focused on the outcome, but just the process, it can be so freeing to just allow yourself to do something where you are not so concerned about the outcome.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, wonderful. I'm just going to try something new. I'm going to be a kid again.
Yeah. It's so funny you say that. I just had a podcast. I think it was just today or on Monday that I talked about that. And that's like, you just need 1 hour. Just give yourself 1 hour to even an hour a day or even a week. Just do something just for the sake of doing it that you love, with no expectation or anything. Just that you give yourself that time to explore. One of the other things that to talk about is that when you were at one point in your life, when you were, I guess, at your lowest, your creativity kind of not stopped, but it really went dry. You have been the happiest and you're creating content, but then that happened. So how does that kind of overwhelm or emotional overload just not just change our work, but also our identity, our sense of who we are and our relationships? Because you love the creative side, but that also went away when you were experiencing this overwhelm and anxiety. So how does that
Yes.
work with not only who we are, but what we do and our relationships?
Yeah, there are a couple of things. One, I would say that creativity, and I understand creativity as a broad concept, not you don't need to be an artist in order to be creative, but something where you are, in my world, just putting your own spin on things, whatever that thing is, right? It can be writing, it can be how you connect with others, if you organize events, whatever that is that you do for work, you can bring creativity into that space. And when creativity goes dry, I think that it impacts our identity because we create narratives about who we are as humans. And that's helpful because then we go out into the world with more competence, right? We feel able to do the work that we're supposed to do. But at the same time, it can be limiting when we get stuck on those narratives of who we are. And that part of, for me, when I realized, well, I'm dry creatively, like I didn't have anything else that I felt like I could provide that was different from what I had been sharing and writing about and creating professional development for the last 10 years. It felt very sad because I'm like, well, if I'm not doing that, what am I doing, right?
Yeah.
Who am I if I'm not doing that thing that I thought I was doing?
Yeah.
So I actually went through this process of, I don't know if you're familiar with the Artist Way from Julia Cameron,
Yes.
but it's a self-guide program that you go through if you are trying to rediscover your creativity. And going through that, one of the things that you are asked to do is go on these artist dates. So, and that's exactly what you are saying about, like, take an hour to do something that feels good to you. So these artist dates, you are weekly dates that you have with yourself. You don't go with anybody, which is also interesting. So there's not other stimulus. Yeah. And they can go from going to a museum to visiting a park to maybe cleaning your closet. Like it can be anything truly that brings you joy, but that you are intentionally dedicating time for joy and play, right?
Yes.
So that I realized at first when I read about it, I was so excited. And I said, oh, this is fantastic. But then as I started to kind of make my plan, I was feeling guilty because I'm like, how am I stopping work and my obligations to go do something that felt so just for the fun of it? And I was looking at it the wrong way. It's not, if you want it to work, you have to come with that sense of, this is also part of what I do, right? It's not something added. It's not something that you are neglecting your other responsibilities. Truly something that you do to care and nurture yourself. And Julia Cameron talks about nurturing your inner child, which is where your creativity comes from. So if you want to have creative ideas, you cannot be a harsh coach, right? You have to be a nurturing friend to let the creative juices flow. So once I understood that, it was easier to engage with those artist dates in a way that were meaningful. And I did different kinds of things. And even now that the book is out, I'm thinking, oh, I should go back to that because I want to continue to nurture that playfulness and that sense of, if you want to be creative, you need to put like creative inputs in your life versus just going on the autopilot and the everyday routine.
Yeah. It just seems so common sense that why can't we do the things that we love to do? Now, I know we can't do it all the time because we have responsibilities, but
right.
Why is it so hard for us to just let go, even for an hour or for an artist date, or to really, and it's not just about doing, it's about just who we are being. And if we let go and just kind of, like you said, go back to your passion, go back to what you were loved to do as a child, or it just frees up so much positive energy, then it just flows into relationships. It flows into your work. You just are more energized as a person. So yeah, it's interesting. So you did that and then it kind of came back, the creativity, or it just kind of.
Well, I mean, it sounds like a cookie cutter, but truly, like after several months of working with the artist's way, and another of the practices is doing these morning pages. So you are supposed to write 3 pages of unedited, just like what comes to mind, just whatever is in your mind, just put it on a page. And after several months of going through that process, there was a day when I was in a work meeting with a colleague and she said something that sparked an idea. And then when we were done with the meeting, I had this urge to just open a Word document and I wrote the outline of the book in one sit. Like I opened the document and I said, oh, this is it. I saw it and I wrote it. And of course the outline changed as I was writing, but then I saw that was the thing, right? And once I saw that there was another book inside of me, then I found the path, right? Okay, this is what's next. And then that gave me something to work with. Mm-hmm. And truly the book has been a bridge to my own healing because a lot of the research and the authors and the tools that I developed for the book, they were things that I used with myself as I was going through that process. And even at the beginning, I didn't think about the book as being about burnout because I was just trying to support others. But as I was going through, it became very clear that my experience of burnout was the key that was connecting all the other pieces in the book that I was trying to teach. Mm-hmm. And to be open about that experience, I felt it was both healing because I was able to name what I was going through, but also a bridge to my purpose, which is truly to help others develop their heart and their heart potential. So things came together, but again, I was coming from like the desert. I really felt like I was in the desert and suddenly I found a little bit of water and I drank it and I was like, okay, that's it.
Well, it sounds like a lot of water you had to drink.
Yes. Yeah, I was very thirsty.
Wow, that's amazing. I love that. I love that story because it just exemplifies just what we talked about. That hour, and then that practice of the morning pages and the artist dates, and then that led to your idea. And then I love how you said it was a bridge to my own healing and also a bridge to my purpose. Mm-hmm. And I think for so many women who are listening as well and who have going through the same thing, you mentioned earlier that they opened up a lot about their experiences with burnout and other things. And so that's what happens is when we open ourselves up and share our story in a vulnerable way, then other people can say, oh, okay, I'm going through the same thing, right? And yes. So for those women who may be listening, who are, I guess, a few steps behind on this path that you went through, and congratulations on the book also. That's wonderful.
Thank you.
What would be, and I know there's a lot of messages, but what would be, I guess, one of the most important things that you'd want her to know as she's going along this path?
I would say that, and this sounds maybe cliche, but that they are not alone. Mm-hmm. And there are so many of us who have had going through transitions, dealing with burnout. There are so many situations where the challenges, the pain is real. Mm-hmm. And also there are things that you can do in order to support yourself. And that was one of the goals as I was finishing the book, to really create something that people could take and do something positive with it. And it is sometimes hard to find that listening ear or the listening friend who will sit next to you or will understand what you are going through. And that's something that I try to do for others, because in a way you write what you need yourself. And I think it was true for me that I didn't find those resources as I was going through. Maybe it was a little bit not too late, because there was great things that happened. But having those resources and having those tools and knowing that even if you are going through something difficult, that you can overcome because you have inner resources that you can use and you have community, you can find people to support you as you are going through that.
And you have lovely resources like your book, right? To help you.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Tell us a little bit about your book and anything that you want to share about it and what people can learn from it.
Yeah, so it's currently available anywhere that you buy books, any retailer.
And it's called Living with the Heart in Mind.
Yes, it's called Living with the Heart in Mind, a practical guide to healing from burnout and cultivating purpose. And it's a very practical resource. It has more than 60 tools, like the motion iceberg exercise that I explained today. That's in the book, and you can have, and there are similar exercises throughout for different areas that we have discussed, like creativity and curiosity and how to cultivate or find your purpose. So there are many things that you can do. And the book also has a self-assessment that you can take that's freely available on my website. That's at loreamartinez.com. And you can take the assessment and then see for the 3 parts of the book, which is the hard skills, intentional habits, and vital qualities, where you are today for those 3 areas. And then you receive a report with the results and you can see, okay, maybe I need to work on my habits or maybe I need to work on my skills. And then you have the book right there so you can use it to develop your skills.
Sounds fabulous. Sounds wonderful. Absolutely. We'll have the links to the book and your website in the show notes, but it sounds like a wonderful companion to anyone who is, or like a guide, I guess, to anyone who may be experiencing burnout or trying to figure out kind of what's next and on their path. Thank you for sharing that. I think it sounds wonderful. Is there anything else that you'd want to kind of share before we wrap up today? That we've covered a lot, but anything that we might have missed that you'd like to share with the audience?
Yes, I would say that for the listeners, if you are going through something, know that it takes time. I know that goes, it's counter to the narrative today where we want like the pill, we want the easy fix, we want the thing that is gonna just make us not feel the things that we are feeling. But if you want to do the deeper work, it takes time. So just let yourself have that time to heal, to practice, to play with new tools, and to really go back to yourself. I think that's the key of it all.
And give yourself permission to do that, right? Yes. That's wonderful advice. Thank you so much for being here, Lorea. It was a great conversation, and we will share all your links with the audience. And I wish you all the best with the book as well.
Thank you. My pleasure to be here.
What a rich conversation with Lorea. I'm so grateful to have her on the show and for the reminder that our feelings are not in the way of the work. They are part of the work episode. First, that your emotions are data, not weakness. Think of that iceberg Lorea and I talked about, the loud feelings sitting above the water and the deeper, truer ones underneath, the ones we're not always allowed to name. When you take the time to ask yourself honestly, what else am I feeling? You begin to detangle what is really going on, and that is where clarity starts. Second, that you can be living your purpose and still be burnt out, because purpose is not a destination you arrive at once and are done with it. It changes as you change, and if the thing that used to light you up has quietly stopped, that is not a sign that you have failed. It is a signal, right on time, that your purpose is asking to be revisited. And third, that whatever comes next for you does not have to be enormous or finished or perfect before you begin. As Lorea so beautifully put it, it can be a pilot, a small experiment, 1 hour given to something with no pressure and a little curiosity. You don't need the whole plan. You need one small, kind step towards yourself. So here's the now. This week, when a difficult feeling arises, don't push it away and don't judge it. Get curious about it instead. Ask what is underneath it and what might be trying to tell you. And if you're ready to look honestly at where you are right now, at which parts of you are thriving and which have gone quiet, that is exactly what my new Ikigai Clarity Assessment is for. It just takes a few minutes and it will show you your own starting place. You will find the link at the top of the show notes. And then, if you would like to make real sense of what it shows you, book a complimentary clarity call with me, and we will look at your results together and help you find your very next steps towards your reason for being. Both links are waiting for you in the show notes, along with Lorea's book and her free resources, which I can't recommend enough. And remember, you get to decide what comes next. So say it with me and say it with confidence. It's my time now.